Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge. Hi guys, I just wanted to throw a quick episode in here and address some comments, some concerns, and maybe some potential bugs that we've got so far in this chapter with the save and load system. And so we'll look at those and discuss a couple things, and I don't know, hopefully this helps you guys out. First, I want to shout out to this user who's been posting in the Metroidvania Forge channel in the Michael Games server on Discord. He's just got a beautiful looking game. I'm not sure where he got the player asset from. He's kind of mixing a few different things, but it's turning out pretty nicely. Here's his video kind of showing that he's got the save and load system working, and I'm happy that it's working for him. So he's going to save it here. He'll go to the next screen and load it. But there is a bug that, I mean, it's a defect. I represented this even in my own recording of the video, and let me show his version of it. But if you start testing the game on one of these save scenes and you just right away go and save the game, then we haven't initialized the path for the scene just yet because, you know, it didn't, we're using our save or our scene manager system to do that. Okay. And so he's showing here that there's a bug and he's asking, are we okay with that? And that's a good question. Maybe, maybe not. I was okay with it throughout the recording of the video and I thought it wouldn't be much of an issue, but after seeing this, I'm thinking maybe I either A, didn't explain the defect well enough, or B, maybe I shouldn't be okay with it. So let's look at a way that we can fix this particular issue first. So thanks, DayClick, for pointing that bug out and that issue and for sharing your thoughts. Now, he had a good solution to fix it, or she or they. It was essentially maybe two different things, but some of those fixes I don't believe were completely necessary. I think there were red herrings, other minor issues that were kind of tangentially related to this bug, but that wouldn't normally crop up. And so really there's one simple fix, but I want to demonstrate this bug in my version of the project, and then we can talk about the fix together. Okay, so let's just run this scene and I'll kind of step you through this. So I'm going to go over here, and what I'm doing is I'm running the save and load scene right from scratch, which means that our scene manager never loaded this scene. And if you recall, that's the scene manager script is where we're grabbing the scene path. So what happens when when we load it this way, I save my game directly, and then I'm gonna go ahead and open that save file. And you can see that the scene path value here is an empty string. Okay, and that's what's causing this defective and bug behavior. So what happens then is if we're you know, on our merry way playing our game and we decide we want to load that save game, then boink, the game just hangs in the scene transition. And if we look at the debugger, the error is that there's no resource found, because obviously we're passing in a blank string when we're trying to load. We're trying to load nothing. So it kind of makes sense that it didn't find anything. Okay, buggy behavior. What's the fix? Okay, so the real true culprit of this is that we created this current scene UID. Okay, we're keeping a string here, and we're setting it in our transition scene function down below. For me, it's on line 36, but it's, you know, in the middle of this after we fade it out. Now, the problem with when we run like this scene, for example, by pressing F6, well, it's just getting loaded by the engine. It's not getting loaded by our scene manager, so it doesn't ever hit that line of code. Pretty simple solution, and I've already implemented it, tested it, and commented it out. So right here in our ready function, this is what we're going to do. We're going to first initiate or initialize a new variable called current scene. Okay, and technically this is a string, so let's go ahead and type that. And what this will do is it'll get the current scene file path. And I'm going to go ahead and print this out, and let's look at what it looks like here, just so that this makes sense. So I'm running that save scene again. And if we look down here, okay, there it found a scene path, right? So that's good. Now we can just store that. How this works is because technically this scene is the scene that we're running. There are other scenes that are auto load scenes and scripts and things like that. They're not going to be considered the current scene from the tree root, okay? So we can print the current scene, and then you can see I've got this little thing here where we're going to set our current scene UID based off of the scene path. And we're just using this resource UID path to UID. You could actually omit this and you could just save that directly, the scene file path, and technically this code should work. But because we're storing it as the current scene UID, I want to keep that convention and honor it. So let's just go ahead and print the output after we convert it. Now you'll see when we run this, okay, there's the current sinuid that we're going to save. Okay, so this is perfect. Let's go ahead and go back to our game. Here, I've loaded it. I'm going to just save instantly. Let's look at that save file now. Okay, here we go. You can see that our scene path is now populated. Okay, and then obviously, you know, if I go and I try and load this save file, then it works perfectly. Okay, so that's kind of the simple way that we can avoid that bug. So I'm just going to come back into my code, remove this print statement, and there you go. So you just need those 2 lines of code in the on ready. It could be 1 line depending how you write it, but I like making it 2. It keeps it a little bit easier to read and follow. Okay, the next couple bugs come from this user, Kay, in my Discord channel. So thank you, Kay, even though you kind of hurt my feelings. No, just kidding. So he noticed a couple things, 3 things here that I've picked out that we're going to look at. So he says in Chapter 3, Episode 1, we might want to tweak the create new save game function to clear the discovered areas and persistent data. That's very true, because otherwise, right, when we're starting a new game or something, like you could end up having all the areas discovered or something like that. So that's something that we can do. He also mentioned the order in which we might need to heal the player before saving. Excellent observation. And then lastly, he noticed a bug with the controller. So we'll look at that controller bug later, but essentially if you have an unknown controller, it was crashing for him. And so we'll build in a way to avoid that, okay? And I'm not sure that I can test this super well because I don't have a lot of controllers here to test with. So you're going to get some mileage out of this. I may not have the exact fix you need. You can see that Kay recommended just setting a default with his get that he thinks will work pretty good. And I haven't tested this solution. Just on the surface, it looks like it works, right? He's doing to get. So even if he doesn't find his controller type, it'll still return something by default. So that's a pretty good solution. Let's start though with this Chapter 3, Episode 1 issue with the create new save game. And let's clear our discovered areas and persistent data and talk about that. Okay, so that first issue is referring to these bits of data here, right? The discovered areas and our persistent data, because this is an array and this is a dictionary. And currently, if we look at maybe even our load game, like we're setting this to whatever we load. So when we load game, that's fine. But when we create a new game, we're just setting those to whatever they are currently. So imagine a scenario, you load your game where you're at the very end and you're playing and you're just about ready to beat the boss. But without turning off the game, you hand the controller to your little brother who goes back to the title screen and he starts a new game. And now he's got all of your discovered areas and persistent data because we have nowhere in the code to clear those unless you're loading a game. So this create new save game needs to do that. So really what we could do here is somewhere in this area, before we do all this stuff, we need to clear these out, right? So here we're appending, we're adding to our discovered areas, whatever this new game scene is. But let's go ahead and clear it first. So let's say discovered areas, and discovered areas is this array. Now there's actually a common function, and this is the one that Kay uses. It's pretty handy. We can just say .clear. And let's go ahead and look at this. This works on dictionaries and arrays. It removes all elements from the array. It's the equivalent of using resize. There's a couple other ways you could do this. You could probably just set this equal to an empty array or something like that. But I think clear is probably one of the better ways to do it. And then let's just do the same thing for persistent data. And you can see, I mean, even though they're both different data types, there is a clear function. Clears the dictionary, removing all entries from it. Okay? So we'll just clear both of those. And voila, now you've got clean data to work with when you create a new save game. The next item that he was talking about the healing the player before we save the game, has to do with our save point here. So if we look at our script, let's see. On player interacted, we're saving the game, we're healing the player, and emitting those signals. So the problem here is simply that we're saving the game before we heal the player. So if you were like at 1 hit point, just about to die, then you're going to save it at 1 hit point. And sure, it would be easy to heal yourself, but let's just move that. Easy peasy, simple, straightforward fix. All right, now the last one that Kay mentioned is in our player. With our input hint system, we've got this dictionary, we've got all this stuff set up to detect the controller, but we have kind of a flaw. And I think his fix is different than maybe the fix that I might provide. But essentially, we've got some issues. So down here where we on hint changed, this is the line that he fixed, right? So we're grabbing our hint map and we're getting the controller type. Now you'll notice that our controller type, we have keyboard, PlayStation, and Xbox. And you'll notice that when we detect our controller type down here in our get controller type, we can potentially set it to Xbox, PlayStation, Xbox again, or unknown. This is where the error comes from. Now his fix was perfectly fine, but I'm going to fix it right here. Essentially this else statement, this unknown, this is going to become the default controller type if you don't know what kind of controller they're using. So you could either set this to keyboard, Xbox, or PlayStation and avoid the bug. So I'm just going to say PlayStation, which means, okay, if we can't tell what controller they're using and they're not using the keyboard, then let's just give them the PlayStation input hints, right? That's really what's going to happen. And then what this will do then, now down here, this hint map controller type will never be able to pass unknown, right? Because that's what the bug was before. It was saying, oh, controller type of unknown, let's find that. And it goes up here and there's no controller type unknown. Alternatively, you could define that unknown and you could put your own standard default in there for unknown and put a question mark on every button and really confuse your players. I don't know what you've got, so I don't know what to tell you. But there we go. Okay, couple simple bug fixes there. Thank you, Kay, for submitting those and for your involvement in my community, as well as Declick. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is related to a comment I received on the save point video where we did the input hints, because I didn't do anything with Nintendo Switch. And someone pointed out to me something that's kind of obvious, but I just didn't do the research into it, I guess. Here's an Xbox controller layout, X, Y, A, B, same buttons, just different order, right? Like X and Y are swapped and so are B and A. So technically we could come into our system and account for a Switch controller. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so looking at our input hints here, we need to add the Switch. I'm going to go ahead and copy the Xbox layout because these are the ones I want to kind of reuse, but we're going to call this, I'm going to just call it Nintendo. You can change it, call it whatever you want. Make sure we add a comma after this last object. Okay, so if this is going to be a little bit harder. So interact is my top button and attack is like the left button. So let's go ahead and look real quick at the player, at his input hints. So the top button on the Xbox is, I have it on frame 8, right? Which I can't even remember which one that is now. So let's go ahead and just check it out. Okay, so that's Y. So then that means, and then our attack is, I think, 7, right? So if we just swap these, so this is 8 and this is 7, and then we'll do the same for jump and dash because those are our bottom two buttons. So we can say 6 and 5, and then up can remain the same. So there we go. We've got our Nintendo options laid out. We just do need to come down here to our controller detection, and now I can delete this Xbox line and uncomment my Nintendo controller type. Let's just make sure that this matches. Okay. Now, one other fun thing that we could do, if you have a default like I do, my default is PlayStation, and you'll notice I check for a lot more with PlayStation. I'm going to go ahead and just do this. I'm going to just remove all those checks. Boink. Now, if it's Xbox or Nintendo, we'll detect it. Otherwise, we're just going to say it's PlayStation. That simplifies this code a tiny bit. And I also noticed somebody commented it. In fact, it might have been the same comment that there are other ways that you can land on an Xbox controller. And so I think what some people were checking was just if like X was in there. So or X in N. Okay. That'll kind of clean that up a little bit. Now you could add probably a lot of different ways to check these controller types. And I think the number of names and possibilities that you get for these controller types could get pretty big. In fact, doing a check just like this might be so broad and generic that it gives you some false positives, right? You might have a controller that has buttons that look like a PlayStation, but has the letter X in the name. And so it's going to get flagged as Xbox. I mean, I don't know. One thing that I think would be worth doing, but I'm not going to do right now or as part of this series, is to go through and inventory kind of the major naming types that you could have and maybe develop a better system for this. And in fact, there's probably a plugin out there that does this in a more comprehensive manner that you could look for and use. But I think it's worth building this on your own, if for no other reason than just understanding how these input systems in Godot work. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the episode. So thank you for watching. I hope this helped you fix some issues or concerns that you've had as you've been following along. The next episode is going to be the player HUD. I had mentioned that in the previous one. This is just kind of a little bonus extra episode that I wanted to throw in because of the number of kind of comments that were piling up that I felt were worth addressing at a larger scale and a larger, broader scope like this. So again, I hope that helped. Thank you for watching. And as always, we'll see you next time.